wondering if you would just take a little journey with me to the UU Fellowship. I'm standing at the entrance of the sanctuary. People are coming in. Depending upon the weather and the season, Kathy would have already swept the stairs or shoveled the walk. And people would be coming in, taking off their jackets and picking up their name tags. I would be saying hello to people, welcoming them. I would have my stack of service guides and would be presenting them. If there were any members who were, or friends who were coming in that I were unfamiliar with, new folks, I would be inviting them to pick up some information and to sign in. If they would like more information, I would be giving them a phone number where they could contact. Because this is a Zoom meeting, though, that's on your chat screen, the Lakeshore Fellowship's website and my name and phone number. Linda would be paroling the area of the side of the church where she usually greets people. Jim and Tony would be conferring together about some last minute things that they want to settle for the service. Jim would have lit the candle, the center candle for the joys and concerns. And Joy would be ready to play our opening song. So let's do that today, and welcome to the Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Today we will be exploring 3 of the Unitarian Universalist principles, and I'll reference that later as we get into, just before we get to Tony's presentation. And in addition to the 7 principles, we have a covenant. And a covenant is an agreement between the members of our organization. It governs how we implement our principles and how we show love and respect, how we use democratic process in our congregation, and how we work for social justice. If you have the order of service, the last page of the order of service today includes a copy of that covenant. And it was developed by the congregation this fall. So as I welcome Rev Tony Larson, I want to acknowledge him. This is his first time back since he worked with us last fall. And for all of you who participated in the development of our covenant, you really learned that Tony asked some incredible questions about how we got to this fellowship and what did it really mean to us. And we heard each other's stories, and it was through those stories that we developed this covenant. So I wanted to just acknowledge that as we begin this process here today. At this point, I want to stop and see if there are any announcements that anyone would like to make. If you have an announcement, either unmute yourself or press down on the space bar and hold it down.
Jim, I have an announcement for everyone. Our flower communion ceremony is coming up on May 17th. And because of the coronavirus, we're going to be doing that via Zoom. And so in order to share our flowers, I'm going to ask you to find a favorite flower photo, a branch photo, a photo of something that means something to you flower-wise. And I'm going to have Kim put it in the newsletter. We will need to send that photo to Jenny Fennell, and she will have her email address, her text phone number, and her at-home address if you would prefer to mail it to her. And she is going to put together a slideshow of our flowers. And so please look for that photo, and we will put it together, and we will do the best we can to recognize Norbert Čapek, who founded the Unitarian Church in Czechoslovakia and started the ritual of the flower communion, and eventually died at Dachau because of his Unitarian beliefs. So please look into that, and we want to see a whole bouquet of flowers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary Jo. Are there any other announcements?
Yes, I have an announcement. I would just like to suggest that everyone try and watch Michael Moore's new movie that's out, and it's available on YouTube, and it is called Planet of the Humans. It is disturbing, and it certainly takes a look at our energy future, and I think everyone will be very surprised by this film. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Any other announcements?
I just wanted to reiterate, I sent out a message to the Chalice group about delaying our annual meeting because we just have so much has been going on that we're behind on the pledge drive, and we need to get things set for that meeting. I don't know whether at this point, I don't think it, well, I'm sure it won't be in person, so we're going to have to do it via Zoom. So we will let you know. I think it will be sometime in June, early probably, but we'll let you know when we have a date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other announcements? I have just a final announcement to remind people that the fellowship gathers on Wednesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon for a check-in. We've been doing that since the social distancing started, and it's really become really quite a wonderful hour and a half discussion. And Tony joined us this Wednesday, and we did a little Earth Day celebration and a special song and a few laughs. So don't know what'll be up on this coming Wednesday, but if you're free and want to connect, please, you can use the same link that you used to come to today's service. So with that, I am going to start the service by lighting the chalice. And let me see if, I think you can, yeah, there we go. Okay. So, we light this flame as a symbol of the warmth in every human heart.
Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to share our strength and fellowship. Thus do we covenant.
Okay, and our
Sing in my
prayer written by Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk, really quite famous he's from Vietnam, and quite famous for really being at the heart of the mindfulness movement that has spread around the world. So these are his words. Let us be at peace with our bodies and minds. Let us return to ourselves and become wholly ourselves. Let us be aware of the source of being, common to us all and to all living things. Invoking the presence of the great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living things. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other. With humility, with awareness of the existence of life and of the suffering that is going on around us, let us practice the establishment of peace in our hearts and on earth. Amen. And Tony, I'm going to invite you to do the second reading.
All right. Okay, this reading is came from an article in a book that I had read a long time ago, but happened to come across more recently, and its message struck me. It was written by someone who had nearly died in a hospital, but through the help of friends who came and visited her regularly, she came through it, and this is what she said. I tell you, I would have died but for the friendships. The doctors had just about given up. Forget it for having any will to live. I can't begin to describe the despair. Beyond the relentless physical pain, there was this utter emptiness of heart and soul. Each morning felt like waking up in hell. Can you understand that? Every morning feeling that way, like it was the first time. And yet people came and they called and they cared and they stayed. And each gesture came to feel almost miraculous to me. And there were moments when I would say, you just don't know what this means to me. And they didn't. They couldn't or wouldn't. Isn't that wild? They really didn't see it. They really didn't recognize just how much their ordinary expressions of love would do for me. On the one hand, I thought it was wonderful that they wouldn't make a big deal out of something that seemed so simple for them, just showing up. But on the other hand, I wanted to shake them and say, do you know how beautiful you are? Won't you see? As if they were angels who had forgotten. After reading this, I couldn't get this idea out of my head. Not just the fact that ordinary people sometimes do wonderful things, without realizing it, but that, as this woman put it, it's as if they were angels who had forgotten. What an interesting concept, that human beings are angels who don't realize it. It's similar to the Hindu teaching that we are all divine at heart. We are all God unfolding itself into the world. Or the Buddhist concept that we are bodhisattvas, Buddhas, to be beings on the road to enlightenment. Only we live in ignorance of our true nature. And in case that sounds a little too mystical or esoteric, don't worry, I'm not planning to talk about theologies and creedal formulations. It's actually something much more ordinary than that. And at the same time, it may be more profound. It's the idea that there is something precious in us and in those around us that ordinary words don't always seem to be able to express. So we search for words like magical or miraculous or overwhelmingly beautiful. And what makes this experience especially fascinating to me is that it is often very ordinary. I mean, the people who visited this woman, who held her hand and gave her a hug and talked to her and listened to her, they were doing probably what seemed to them like minor things, nice, but ordinary acts. And yet to the person who needed what they had to give, needed it in a way beyond asking, it was nothing less than a miracle. Now, I've always believed in this theoretically. I mean, it's in our 7 UU principles. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, which is just another way of saying everyone has a light or everyone is precious. But this woman who described her hospital encounters with angels actually experienced this thing that we talk about in theology and poetry without always realizing at a gut level what it is. Before I go into some other examples, let me just say a few words about that word angel. We tend to think of an angel as a supernatural being. Actually, the word angel comes from the Greek. I don't know if this shows in the right way for you, does it?
It does.
It's angelos, and it just means, it's Greek for messenger. So just take off the OS and you've got our word angel. And the word for message in Greek is angelion. Again, angel. So it's message, messenger. And if you put the EU in front of it, in Greek, EU just means good. So if you have a good message, you have an euangelion. And if that sounds familiar, have you ever heard of evangelical? That's actually what that means. In fact, even today in Greek, if you want to say thank you, you say eucharisto, which means good gift. So this is still the same in Greek. As it turned out, when they translated it in Latin, it became evangelium, and that's how we have the evangelical word. And when they translated it into English, it came out as good spiel, good message, or God spell, or gospel. So that's how we got the word gospel. It's just an English translation of good message in Greek. All right. I just know how intellectually rigorous you all are about these things, so I thought I would share that. Anyway, all right. Here are a few examples that I've picked somewhat at random from files that I keep on interesting but sort of mundane experiences. And what they all have in common is that they are all about surprising messengers of the holy. And the first is from the Reverend Elizabeth Tarbox, a UU minister from Middleborough, Massachusetts, who describes a very simple experience she had that put her in touch with something bigger than she expected. She writes, "Out walking one morning, I saw a medium-sized turtle begin the dangerous journey across Route 58 from one side of Monposset Pond to the other. Now the traffic is pretty heavy, even at 6 a.m. As the turtle left the safety of the grasses at roadside, I looked right and could see a line of cars coming, led by a Harley Davidson, ridden by a leather-clad figure in a Darth Vader helmet. The turtle was almost at the halfway point, destined for extinction beneath those burning wheels. I moved a few paces into the road and simply pointed to the turtle. The motorcyclist slowed. The rider brought his gleaming bike to a stop. He put out his arm to indicate to the cars behind him that they should not overtake. He allowed the turtle to cross in safety. Then he and I signaled a greeting to each other, and we went on our own ways. The turtle, the motorcyclist, and I were on different journeys that day, and mine was a journey of discovery. I discovered that compassion sometimes wears a motorcycle helmet. I went to a place inside me that fears bikers, and I made a few corrections. I don't know what kind of day the turtle had or the person on the Harley, but my day was better for having encountered them. I like this story because, well, the turtle probably didn't know something special had happened. The motorcyclist may not have thought anything special happened either. He may just have thought, oh, I'm glad that lady pointed out the turtle. I wouldn't have wanted to run over it, and then thought no more about it. The drivers behind the motorcyclist may not have thought anything special happened either. They may not even have seen the turtle and just thought there was some problem they had. We don't know what any of these other people thought. They may have felt awe at the saving of a turtle's life, or they may have gone through with no particular feeling. All we know is that this minister felt something. She saw something she didn't expect. She came away a little changed. She learned that angels sometimes wear motorcycle helmets. Here's another incident I found, again from the file for interesting but mundane experiences. It was a letter to an advice columnist. This one's from 1995, and you can tell it's old because it was written to Ann Landers. Anyone here remember Ann Landers? Like me, all right. Dear Ann Landers, I want to thank an anonymous couple that I met briefly at the Indianapolis airport during a trip to Kokomo last March. I had flown to Indiana for a job interview and was wearing very casual clothing. When I arrived, my garment bag with my 2 best suits, dress shirts, shoes, and toiletries did not arrive. Lost luggage is stressful enough. Expensive clothing and a job interview early the next morning make it terrifying. The airline personnel were quite indifferent. I was frantic. A well-dressed couple I'd never met overheard the conversation. The gentleman asked me what size suit I wore and offered to loan me his. His suit was 1 size larger than mine, but it was better than what I was wearing. I was speechless. Just as I was leaving the airport, a representative of the airline ran after me to announce that my luggage had been found after all. And this incredibly kind couple should know that their offer lifted my morale immeasurably. By the way, I got the job. What I like about this story is that, again, I'll bet the man who offered to loan his suit didn't think he was making a supreme sacrifice. He probably thought it was just common decency. And the thing is, he didn't even end up loaning his suit because the airline found the garment bags in time. But you know, that didn't matter. The fact that he was willing to loan it was what made the difference. You know, many of us have had experiences where someone did something dramatic, something extraordinary, like saving a life or making a great sacrifice or giving an extremely generous donation to an important cause. Or perhaps we've been the one doing the dramatic thing. And in cases like that, words like hero, savior, humanitarian, courageous, all come readily to mind. But an angel who has forgotten is someone who has done something significant without necessarily knowing it, which means it must have seemed like a very ordinary thing, no big deal, except to the person who witnessed it. I suspect most of us have had experiences like this. I know I have. In the early days of my ministry in Racine, about 40 years ago, this is a long time ago, I believe it was, may have been in the fall of 1978. Our church board at that time had a retreat, and a number of board members told me some things that I was not ready for, things I found very painful to hear. And as they were speaking, someone behind me, another member of the board, just gently put her hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't squeeze it. She just laid her hand there as if to say, I know this is hard, but there's love here. and you'll be okay. I don't think this person knew what it meant to me at the time. She probably didn't even think about it. It just came out of her like a very light bird that comes to rest on your shoulder for a moment. Later on, someone else who was a member of the board sent me a card that said, you know, keep on trucking, love so-and-so. And that had the same effect. Another experience like this that I remember is a conversation I had with a group of UU ministers and their spouses. This is about 25 years ago. We were introducing ourselves, and one woman referred to her husband as her partner. And my first thought was maybe they weren't married, you know, because why would she say partner instead of husband? But it turned out they were married. She referred to her husband as her partner because she was aware that gay people didn't get to refer to their partners as their husbands or wives. And she wanted to even the playing field a bit. It was as if she was saying, my relationship, though society may recognize it as legal, is no more important than yours. So I will refer to my husband with the same language you use. Such a small thing, but so powerfully affirming. A little later that day, I said something to the effect that I was always so grateful to be at UU gatherings. You know, we sometimes forget this because society has moved significantly since that time. But UUs were out there in the forefront. So I said how grateful I was to be at UU gatherings where my relationship was considered as valid as anyone's. And this same woman said another thing I'll never forget. She said, you shouldn't have to be grateful. It's what everyone deserves. And I thought, you're right. I shouldn't have to be grateful, but I am. And I'm even more grateful for the fact that you realize I shouldn't have to be. You know, you sometimes, you sometimes have no idea what it means to have you think it's no big deal. That in itself is a big deal. You as UUs act as if it's not a great blessing you have given, but that's part of what makes it a great blessing. Now here's a story from the year I was born, 1949. Many soldiers at that time were coming back from World War II, and almost every highway had men in uniform hitchhiking home to their families. And many people picked them up in those days. They'd see them with their uniforms on and figured, safe guy, and they would pick them up. But one of those soldiers came home to a family reunion, and when he got there, he found out that his mother had kidney problems and she needed a blood transfusion. And if she didn't have it, she probably wouldn't make it through the night. But her blood type was AB negative, which was very hard to get in those days because it was rare. I guess it still is, but there weren't many blood banks or air flights to ship it, and no one in the family had her blood type. So her son left the hospital after he heard about this to gather up the family members to say goodbye to their mom. And as he was driving down the highway, he saw another soldier, just like him, hitching a ride. And he almost passed him up, you know, because he was thinking, I'm not in any mood to talk to anybody. But he thought, no, I'll stop and I'll give the guy a ride. And that soldier got in the car and said, thank you, you know, and that soldier noticed that he was crying as he was driving. Now, for the rest of the story, I'll read you what his daughter wrote about it, all right? My father left the hospital in tears to gather up all the family members so that everyone would get to a chance to tell grandmother goodbye. Of course, it's her grandmother. That's why she calls her grandmother. As my father was driving down the highway, he passed a soldier in uniform hitchhiking home to his family. Deep in grief, my father had no inclination at that moment to do a good deed. Yet he pulled to a stop and waited as the stranger climbed into the car. My father was too upset to even ask the soldier his name, but the soldier noticed my father's tears right away and inquired about them. Through his tears, my father told this total stranger that his mother was lying in a hospital dying because the doctors had been unable to locate her blood type, AB negative. And if they did not locate her blood type before nightfall, she would surely die. It got very quiet in the car. Then this unidentified soldier extended his hand out to my father, palm up, and resting in the palm of his hand were the dog tags from around his neck. The blood type on the tags was AB negative. The soldier told my father to turn the car around and get him to the hospital. My father's mother, my grandmother, lived until 1996, 47 years later. And to this day, no one in our family knows that soldier's name. But my father has often wondered, was he a soldier or was he an angel in uniform? And this next experience or story is kind of a life and death one, but again, the angel in here probably didn't know he was one. In 1944, during World War II in France, there was a deportation train carrying members of the French resistance to a concentration camp. A few passengers were able to jump off and survive, even though it was moving very fast. And one of them was very badly hurt, but a farmer found him and took him to his farm where he let him stay until the end of the war. Now, this was actually a very dangerous thing for the farmer to do, especially since this particular resistance fighter was Jewish. And the farmer and his family could be sent away or even be killed themselves for harboring a refugee. But he and his family did it anyway. And many years later, this man that they had saved became a social worker. And he did a lot of work with children. And since he remained a very religious Jew, some children once asked him about a religious question that they had. They said, "What is an angel? We don't understand what an angel is because we've never seen one." And this man, thinking of the farmer who saved his life, said, "An angel is someone who, just when you think all is lost, when you think no one will ever help you, that nothing is possible, all of a sudden, an angel is there to help." After this sermon, I'd like you to share, for the question and answer part, I'll invite you to share any of your own experiences where, if you like, where something that seemed very ordinary had an extraordinary effect on you. But for now, I just want to say something about why it might be worthwhile to see other people as angels who have forgotten and to see yourself as an angel who has finally remembered. It's not so much a literal truth as it is a spiritual one. You do not always realize that you sometimes have the most profound effect on people you'll never guess unless they tell you. You don't see how your ordinary actions, things you may do without even thinking about it, might manifest a vision of human goodness that gives hope to people you may never suspect, or for that matter, never even know. And remember also, if it's true that at the best, that the best angels often don't know they're angels, and what they do may seem quite ordinary to the casual observer, and it's only the person watching carefully who sees their true nature, if that's true, then there may be angels around you right now who appear to be doing very ordinary things, but who, if you look carefully enough, may be hiding a halo. There's a book in the New Testament, Paul's letter to the Hebrews, that says, "Do not forget to entertain strangers, for some have thereby entertained angels unawares." Paul was probably referring to Abraham and Sarah, who had 3 strangers in ragged clothes come to their door asking for shelter from the cold. And Abraham invited them in to sit near the fire, and Sarah took the food she'd been preparing for herself and Abraham and divided it up into 5 portions so that they all would be able to eat. And that's when the 3 strangers revealed themselves as angels, as God's messengers. I think what scripture passages like this are trying to tell us is The divine is present in ordinary people, sometimes even in unpleasant seeming people. God or the holy or that which is most precious, depending on the words you are comfortable with, is often made manifest in places and people where we never expected to find it. Sometimes in strangers whom we may only meet once and then they're gone, but who touch us somehow, who reveal something by their manner, by their actions, by their words, something that hints of a more beautiful world than we are used to seeing. And we, in turn, may, without always realizing it, hint of a more beautiful world to someone else. We don't need to know every time it happens. We don't need to know that it does happen. And thus, may we always be angels who may have forgotten, but occasionally remember. All right, time for the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. We have some time, about 10 minutes for discussion. Anyone who has a story to share is welcome. If you want to speak, identify yourself and press down on the space bar or unmute yourself in the bottom right left-hand corner.
Actually, I remembered something. Years ago, there was, our church had a gay AA group. Sometimes AA groups, not everyone in the group might be supportive of gay people. And so sometimes gay people have found it helpful to be with other people that they know will be supportive of them. And so there was a gay AA group that met at our church. And I saw one of the members once, and it was someone that I had dated actually many years before. And he reminded me who he was, and he told me something. He said, "Do you remember the time when you told me that you thought I had a problem with alcohol?" And I didn't remember that at all. He said, "I was really mad when you told me that, but you were right, and now I'm in AA, and it's changed my life." And I thought, I had no idea that I had said anything worthwhile. And the fact that I didn't know makes me think, and the fact that other people have said things to me that made a difference, and I'm sure they didn't know, that we must all do that. We're just not aware of necessarily. And maybe it's good that we don't always know.
Yeah. Tony, I have a story I can share. I was at a UU The Vote workshop yesterday, and we were talking about what really moves us from a political point of view. I didn't get to share the story yesterday, but I will share it today. And it started for me in 1975 when I worked at United Cerebral Palsy in Pittsburgh. And I worked with infants, and there was a demonstration that was planned. This was back before the ADA. There was a Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act that gave people the right for access to federal buildings, and was the very start of removal of architectural barriers. I was asked to help transport some people from a nursing home, Kane Nursing Home, to this demonstration. And so I had two women and a young man, all in their 20s and 30s, who were living in institutions because they couldn't get around in the world. And they attended the rally, and they marched around the YMCA in downtown Pittsburgh. And that was my real first encounter with adults with disabilities. And it really changed my life. It just, I went on to become the state executive director for United Cerebral Palsy in Pennsylvania. And I was really about helping people learn how to advocate, like those first three men and women taught me. And we passed attendant care legislation in Pennsylvania. The unique thing was that the governor called me up and said, "Stop all these calls. I'll sign your bill." But I couldn't stop those calls. Just get the bill signed quickly. And then I became the National Program Director for United Cerebral Palsy. 15 years later, in 1900 or 1990, the ADA was passed. It's 18 years later now, and the world is really accessible. And you know, it taught for me the power of that political advocacy on just one item, and it was really sourced by those 2 women and 1 man that had the guts to go to a rally and demand their rights. Any other stories that people would like to share?
I have
Or
a comment
comments?
here, Jim and Linda. I think the stories of Angels Who've Forgotten would be a fabulous summer service, because I have the feeling there's a lot of stories that are going over our heads right now. I have a couple. One is when our daughter Sarah and her husband Ashley from England were married a couple years ago on our lawn. Ashley came from Madison, where he was living, and forgot one piece of his kilt. Am I using that right?
Mm-hmm.
That he was so proudly ready to wear. He left his awesome tall wool socks at home. And he thought, how will I find a pair of socks to go with my kilt? So he went to a store in Manitowoc, and a person standing there heard him tell the story and said, oh, I just happen to have kilt socks at home. Would you like to follow me? And he was new to the United States, did not know if he should trust this person, but he trusted him and followed him to his home, where the man kindly gave him the most beautiful woolen kilt socks to wear for the wedding. And that night, before the reception was even over, he was washing them in the sink and hanging them on our clothesline to return the next day to this very kind person that he has never seen since. And he said, the people of the United States are so kind. And I said, yes, they are. So that's just one story. The other one I'll say for a summer service, Linda.
Jim, I just want to remind everyone that we now have a community care program fund that at our UU, that if people are concerned about, in particular, my interest goes to the undocumented workers who are really in an uncomfortable situation without any, whatever they call those checks, supplemental checks, stimulus checks, that's it, Joe.
Right.
So we will be, and if you know of someone who needs some assistance, let someone on the board know, because we already have about 500 in that account ready to help someone. So, and that's aside from money that has been sent directly to Jennifer to help her. So just so you know, we can be angels and maybe not know where it goes or what, but it will help someone.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more story.
With the talk today, and Jim, you're sharing about cerebral palsy, because my mom and dad were the chairpersons for the March of Dimes in Manitowoc when we were little, and we would stand on street corners and proselytize for collecting for the March of Dimes. And so I have lots of wonderful memories of pizza parties, and we were like 10, my brothers and sisters were, we were 10 to 14 years old, so it was really a formative kind of thing that was happening. And also today's talk makes me think of one of my favorite sayings. A healer in Los Angeles asked me to design a card for them, and they wanted it to be based on the saying, angels fly because they make light of themselves. and so that saying has been with Robert and I because of putting together a brand and a logo. you mess with lots of different designs and ideas, but she was adamant that it be based on that saying, which was, across her card and across, all of her promos. So just having to mix and mess with that for, it was about a month plus to develop, the design and the approval and all of that. But today's talk and the stories that were shared and, the hitchhiking story, picking up the hitchhiker or the service person with AD blood, it just brings that, angels are there and we don't always see them. They're, I have the feeling that their light almost blinds us sometimes, where we're not aware, we don't see them until, we're able to have a sense of what is happening and the import of what is happening, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. So thank you for today's unfolding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benita. All right, I want to take just a moment to remind people that the Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist Fellowship is supported by pledges from the members and donations from our friends. If you are interested in making a donation, you can go to our website and there's a button where you can do a PayPal donation. If you are a member pledging, just a reminder to mail in your monthly pledge. And I want to alert people, you either have recently received or will be receiving a letter related to our pledge drive for next year. That's currently started. And we're asking people to read the letter, consider what support you're able to make for the fellowship for our next fiscal year. And then it's based on those pledges that we will put our budget together for the annual meeting that Erica referenced later. So, and I want to thank everyone. As a lay-led congregation, we really depend upon your volunteer energy and the contributions that people make, as well as the financial contributions. We appreciate all of the support, and we thank you for that. And it's time to do our closing song. How Could Anyone is the title of the song. It was
anything less than beautiful.
In the Jewish Talmud, it is written, when a person walks on the highway, a company of angels goes before them, proclaiming, make way for the image of the Holy One. You are the image of the Holy One. And whether there are angels going before you to proclaim that, and whether anyone else even notices it, live as the Holy One you are, and let your spirit fly.
Shalom Chaverim, Shalom Chaverim, Shalom, Shalom. Lehitraot, Lehitraot, Shalom, Goodbye, my friends, be safe, my friends, have peace, till we meet again, have peace, have peace. Goodbye, my friends, be safe, my friends, be safe, my friends, till we meet again, till we meet again, Shalom Chaverim, Shalom Chaverim, Shalom, Shalom, Lehitraot, Lehitraot, Shalom.
Now that concludes our service. Kathy, would you end the recording?